Hello there, fellow nerds. So, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. There will be spoilers for this movie, so if you haven't seen it, what are you doing here? Come back later. So, I can see why a lot of people hate this movie. It's certainly not the best Marvel movie. I probably won't be rewatching it the second it appears on Disney Plus. It was weighed down by endless special effects and was kind of visually exhausting. But it gives us a new hero in the form of Cassie Lang, and it's funny, and it's got a great father-daughter bond at its center, and it put Kang on the big screen, and I'm excited for his future as the overarching villain of phases 5 and 6. So, most people I know personally seem to find the first two Ant-Man movies rather underwhelming, except for my sister, who thinks they're some of the best movies in the MCU. Why does she think this? Because she likes the characters. She adores Hope Van Dyne and loves seeing Hope and Scott together. She hasn't seen it yet, but my prediction is that she's going to resent this movie with every fiber of her being because Hope Van Dyne does nothing in this movie. I mean, sure, she's with Scott at the beginning when he picks up Cassie from the jail. She comes in to help Scott climb up the pile of Scotts. The little ant imagery there, I guess, is kind of funny, and the Baskin-Robbins version. What am I doing here? And she jumps back into the quantum realm to save Scott from Kang at the end, but throughout the whole middle, she follows her parents around while they save the day, and I really didn't expect her to jump in at the end because she hadn't really taken a lot of initiative at any other point. It's almost like they think you can't have more than one female lead or something, although they did do things with Janet. Okay, I'm rambling. For the most part, I had nothing against Hank and Janet. Hank was funny. Science with ants. Ant science, and also, I know socialism is a loaded term, and Janet finally got a chance to be a lead, to be a character. She's no longer the perfect disappeared mother figure from before. I thought her backstory with Kang was cool. It was a chance for both of their acting to shine. Some people seem to think, for some reason, that Jonathan Majors was a weird choice for Kang, but I thought he was great in Loki, and he's great in this. He's got this ability to be both charismatic and soulful. You get to see how he gets to be this charismatic leader in every reality. He's like Thanos. He believes in what he's doing, but he's human. So you can see his pain in his eyes. I love how in this movie he always seems on the verge of tears. But again, since he's not a big purple dude, he's got this groundedness that even Thanos, as great a villain as Thanos is missing. Often a villain makes or breaks a movie and almost always has the power to significantly strengthen or weaken it, and this movie, where most of what you see is special effect and there are constant flashing lights and weird quantum aliens, not sure what else to call them, it was especially important that the villain be not just interesting but grounded, real, instantly recognizable as human. He's often the most physical thing in a shot, and that makes him feel like a threat, more of a worthy opponent to the main characters. Anyway, I thought Janet saving him, making friends with him, highlights her loneliness and plays with the common time travel multiverse concept of what if you save someone who becomes a mass murderer? Was it the right thing to do? Are you now responsible for what they do with their future? However, I really didn't need the information that both Hank and Janet had affairs. It was like, okay, that was just unnecessary, I'm sorry. Really not sorry. And as cool as it was to see Hank sit there with his giant mega smart ants, and I did laugh a lot when he tried to make his pitch for ant socialism and Hope's just like, God save it. I thought the fact that the ants somehow had more time than the humans did and developed all this tech, well, that's a stretch. Doesn't break the story. That's the thing about the quantum realm as a concept. Pretty much anything goes, so you can do pretty much anything you want, but pretty much anything goes, and sometimes anything you want feels like there are no limits, and so the story is less grounded. It's usually important for readers or viewers to have at least a basic understanding of why things work, or they struggle to accept both problems and solutions in the story. But I did get a laugh out of the fact that the device in Hank's ear that I'd assumed the whole movie was a hearing aid turned out to be an ant communicator. It was thematically intriguing that Cassie is in jail at the beginning, but then we find out that she's not there because she's done something for personal gain, not burglary or anything self-enriching as Scott did, but because she was protesting police tear-gassing homeless people. She's the one from the beginning telling Scott he should be doing more rather than profiting off his role in saving the world. Now, I figure some people aren't going to like the fact that Scott's written this self-aggrandizing book and lets business owners give him free coffee when they think he's a different superhero altogether. And apparently he listens to his own book in the car, and Still other people are going to complain that he's kind of been reset to the guy who doesn't really care about the big picture, just about his daughter and his own comfort. But I think that's part of what makes Scott work. He's a normal guy. Most people like convenience and are more motivated by the people closest to them, like their kids, than they are by big picture things like saving the universe. And I think it's important that at least one Avenger reacted to fame the way that Scott apparently did. It drives home the idea that average people really can save the world. And let's remember that Scott doesn't really get off the hook for his reaction to his own fame. Cassie, the one he cares about more than anything else, gives him a horrible time for it, and the story proves her right. And again, in most stories, when you have those moments when the bad guy says, do this or I'll kill this person you love, the hero nobly says no, and we love that, and we need examples of that. I mean, most of us don't live in situations where our loved ones get threatened by multiverse conquering supervillains, but we do have our self images and our reputations on the line every day, and we live in a world that encourages us to bend principles and be dishonest for the sake of personal gain, or the images of others who ask us to do bad things for their gain. We need to see heroes make tough choices because it reminds us of who we really want to be. But let's face it, most people would not be able to stand idly by while someone tortured their child. They'd probably agree to go get the power core for Kang like Scott does. Even at the risk of trillions of all reality, they'd only be able to see their child in that moment. Scott's a real guy, and he makes mistakes, and he really struggles with the right thing. But this movie shows that in the end, the fact that Cassie is at the heart of everything he does is actually a strength. And that allows one of the main themes of the Ant-Man movies to shine, which is that just because you struggle to do the right thing doesn't mean you can't always choose to do the right thing in the end. That gets underscored again by Darren, aka MODOK. Oh look, it's a thing from the comics. Anyway, that gets underscored again by Darren, and I think the fact that Cassie has had to forgive her father over and over and over, and push him to change and seen him change, is probably what allows her to give Darren, this guy who tried to kill her when she was 6, a second chance. And I can't believe it took me this long to talk about this, but for the first time, Cassie is truly a character in her own right. I know some people are upset about the recasting, but I actually think it's pretty good. It makes so much sense that this daughter of a guy who became an Avenger out of nothing and who spent most of her time growing up without her father would have this intense drive to look out for the little guy, for real. She's the one out there doing it. Her dynamic with Scott was my favorite part of the movie. I love the bit at the end where they're both big and they hug and she says she wants a lime and he goes, yeah, citrus, it's weird, right? I love that moment when Quaz, the mind reader guy with the glowing forehead, says, you've disappointed her, and Scott's just like, yeah, thanks, I know. And I laugh so hard in that part where Scott's trying to teach her moves in the middle of the battle and he says, did you see that? And she says, no, you're really small. Now, one more thing I want to say before getting into the after credit scenes. There are a lot of potential young Avengers in the universe right now. They've gone for that hard. They've made an excuse to stick a kid or young adult in like nearly every story. Some of them, like Morgan Stark, are too young to do anything anytime soon, and many have felt kind of tacked on, like Thor's daughter, or just there, like Isaiah Bradley's grandson. That's not to say they can't do anything interesting with those kids, they just haven't yet. Clint Barton's relationship with Kate Bishop is the only case we've had so far of direct mentoring between superheroes since Tony Stark and Peter Parker. Until now. Now we've got this father-daughter thing going on, and I love it. They get on each other's nerves, and it's super relatable, honestly. The first after-credit scene was alright. It shows all the Kangs ganging up, convinced the Kang they exiled to the quantum realm is dead, which actually made me all the more convinced that the Kang in this movie isn't dead. I think perhaps having that whole stadium full of Kangs would have been more impressive if the movie hadn't been so visually overwhelming all the way up to that point. But that just goes for everything in this movie. Everything intimate was overshadowed by it being too big, and everything big didn't feel big. Anyway, I might even be willing to bet that the Kang that they think is dead is the same Kang from Loki. Which, speaking of, the second scene was short, but it didn't need to be long. I am so hyped for Loki Season 2. It was so good to see Mobius and Loki again. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy. It's funny, I was never much of a Loki fan until Thor Ragnarok. I know that's heretical. And when he stands up in front of Thanos at the beginning of Infinity War and says, I am Loki, Odinson, I get chills. The show was what made me feel truly attached to him, and this after-credit scene reminded me of exactly why. Just like Kang, that emotionalism, this guy who can go from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat, who has so much emotion boiling beneath the surface, but how he's the good guy, the hero, yet he's still Loki. That little moment where Mobius is all, the way you talked about him, I thought he'd be all terrifying. And there's a moment of silence as Loki stares forward with these haunted eyes and then whispers, he is terrifying. Ugh, it's so good. Summer 2023 can't come fast enough. Okay, sure, yes, I'm excited for Secret Invasion, not to mention Star Wars things like Mando Season 3 finally. So, not trying to wish my life away, but after today, I'm so hyped for Loki. So yeah, I think this is a good movie thematically. I like the father-daughter bond. I'm excited to see more Cassie. I wish Hope had more of a role, and there was just so much happening visually that it was hard to focus, and the beginning took a while to get off the ground. They're just walking around talking for a long time, and then just about the most grounded thing was when Janet stops Hope from getting hit on by Broccoli. P.S. Remember when Endgame came out, and one of the biggest holes people liked to poke in it was the fact that the Avengers never would have saved the world if a rat hadn't happened to crawl over the dashboard of the van, and then Scott would never have gotten out and been able to help them time travel. And then Quantumania drives home the point that Scott just stumbled his way into becoming a superhero. As you might remember, he only gets to be Ant-Man in the first place because Hank Pym decides to use his skills, i.e., stealing things. Well, maybe that was a bit intentional, or maybe this movie was trying to send the subtle message that coincidences sometimes matter as much as choices in making somebody into a hero. You're in the right place at the right time. I don't know if that's always the best message for a superhero story, but I do think it makes the rat van plot make more sense for Scott than any other character. That's all for now. What did you think? You think I'm way off? I'm still riding the hype a bit.